The moment I'll never forget happened on a Saturday afternoon in my own living room, in the house I'd paid for in cash, sitting on a couch I'd bought with money I'd earned before my wife had ever heard the name of the industry she now worked in. Priya was hosting her friends, 4 of them, all wine glasses and laughter, and that particular kind of noise that only happens when women decide they're safe from judgment. I walked in from the garage still wearing the old gray t-shirt I'd had on since morning, the kind of shirt you wear when you've got nothing to prove to anyone. I'd been out there thinking, actually, just sitting with my thoughts, the way I'd been doing a lot in those 2 years since I stepped back from running the company. Quiet, content, not bothering anybody. I said hello, smiled, reached past one of them, a woman named Tiffany, who I'd met maybe 3 times, to grab a water bottle from the kitchen counter, and that's when Priya said it. "Don't mind Holden." She said it with a little wave of her hand, like she was explaining away a piece of furniture. "He's been home all day. Every day." She laughed, and the sound of it hit me somewhere behind the sternum. "He doesn't really work anymore." The room tittered, nervous laughs, the kind people give when they're not sure if they should laugh, but they follow the lead of whoever seems most confident. "Must be nice," Tiffany said. "It's nice for him," Priya answered, and there was something sharp in it now, something that had been building for a long time and had finally found an audience. "I'm the one actually going to an office every day." I stood there holding my water bottle. I didn't say a word. Because 3 of the 4 women sitting in my living room, including Tiffany, went to that office too. They just had no idea who owned it. Subscribe now, drop a like if you're ready, and tell me, has anyone ever underestimated you this badly? Let's dive in. My name is Holden Price. I'm 47 years old. And the version of me that walked into that living room on that Saturday afternoon did not look like someone who had built anything significant with his life. That's partly by design. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, not the nice part, the part where the parking lots have chain link fences and every house on the block has a different story about why it looks the way it does. My father worked a trades job his whole life. My mother worked the register at a grocery store for 22 years. Nobody in my family talked about business or investment or building something from nothing. Those were concepts that lived in magazines other people read. I started college at Arizona State and dropped out after 2 years, not because I couldn't do the work, but because I couldn't stop doing the work I was already doing on the side. I'd started running small digital campaigns for local businesses, the kind of mom-and-pop places that needed a website and didn't know where to begin. One led to another, then another. Then a restaurant group asked me to manage their entire online presence and paid me more in a month than my father made in 3. That was the moment I understood something had shifted. I was 26 years old and terrified and completely certain of what I was doing. Over the next 20 years, I built what became Price Digital, a mid-size marketing firm headquartered in Phoenix. By the time I stepped back from day-to-day operations 2 years ago, we had 60 employees and contracts with clients across the Southwest and into the Midwest. We managed digital campaigns for regional hospital networks, real estate development groups, automotive dealerships, a handful of fast casual restaurant chains trying to build a national footprint. Not glamorous, but real serious work that made real serious money. I stepped back because I could. Because I'd spent 2 decades being the first one in the building, and I wanted to see what it felt like to be somewhere else. I installed Ryan Gerber as CEO, a man I'd hired as an account manager 11 years earlier, and watched grow into one of the sharpest operational minds I'd seen. Ryan ran the company. I remained the sole owner. I had final say on anything significant, reviewed financials quarterly, and stayed connected without being present in the way I used to be. To most of the staff, I was the founder, a guy who occasionally showed up at company events, someone whose name was on the door, but not in the calendar. I met Priya at a fundraiser for a Phoenix Children's Hospital, the kind of event I attended precisely because it gave me something to do with a Friday night that wasn't sitting in an empty office. She was beautiful and self-possessed and had a laugh that lit up the room. She worked in event coordination then, her own small business planning corporate gatherings and nonprofit galas. She was ambitious, competent, and compelling. We dated for 14 months and got married at a venue in Scottsdale I'd rented out entirely for the occasion. I didn't talk much about the business during our courtship. It was a deliberate choice on my part. I'd spent years watching people react to money in ways I didn't enjoy. The ones who leaned in too hard, who suddenly became very interested in how things worked and what the numbers looked like. I wanted to know who Priya was when she thought she was marrying a comfortable, semi-retired man with a nice house and no particular ambitions left. I needed to know if she liked me, not what I'd built. She passed that test, or I thought she did. We'd been married 3 years when she came to me with an idea. Her event planning business had plateaued. She was good at the work, but scaling it without capital was slow. She had a friend, Tiffany Braun, who worked in marketing operations. Another friend, Cassidy Moore, who was a content strategist. A third, Dana Ellsworth, who handled client accounts. All of them had been telling Priya that Price Digital was expanding its events-adjacent marketing division and that there were openings. I was thinking, Priya told me one evening, about applying. I looked at her over the kitchen counter where I was pouring coffee. "To my company," I said. "I know it's your company," she said, "but Ryan runs it now. You said yourself you're basically advisory at this point. I'd be going through the normal application process. I wouldn't use your name." And she didn't. To her credit, she submitted her resume like anyone else, went through 2 rounds of interviews, and was offered a position as a senior event partnership coordinator, a role that had been created specifically for the new division, which actually needed someone with her background. Ryan called me before extending the offer, as he always did for senior hires, and I told him to treat it like any other candidate decision. If she was the right fit, hire her. She was. He did. Within a year, Tiffany was brought in to run a campaign operations role. Cassidy joined the content team 6 months after that. Dana followed, landing in client services. All of them hired on merit. All of them people Priya had encouraged to apply. All of them sitting in my living room that Saturday, laughing at a joke I hadn't finished hearing. I want to tell you that I walked back into the garage and didn't give it another thought, that I was above it, that a comment like that slides off a man who knows what he knows about himself. But I'm being honest with you here. I sat out there in the garage for a long time after that. Not angry exactly. More like clarified. There's a specific pain that comes from being diminished by someone who should know better. Not a stranger on the street, not a rival in business, your wife. The person who chose you and whom you chose. And the diminishment is worse because it's not ignorance. Priya knew I'd built something. She just didn't respect it anymore because she couldn't see me doing it anymore. In her mind, the man who wasn't driving to an office every morning wasn't a serious person. In front of her friends, her coworkers, she'd made that clear. I thought about the version of me at 26, eating vending machine sandwiches in a rented office space in Tempe, running campaigns for a dental practice and a hardware store and a woman who sold homemade soaps online. I thought about what that version of me would say to the version of me sitting in this garage now. Then I thought about Tiffany Braun's direct deposit, and Cassidy Moore's benefits package, and Dana Ellsworth's quarterly performance bonus, and I picked up my phone and called Ryan Gerber. Ryan had been with me long enough that I didn't need to explain context. I gave him the full picture anyway, because he deserved to understand what he'd be walking into. I told him about the Saturday afternoon, about the comment, about who'd been sitting in the room when it was made. Ryan was quiet for a long moment after I finished. "You want me to look at their files?" he asked. "I want you to look at their performance." There was a distinction, and Ryan understood it immediately. "Tell me what you find." He called me back 2 days later. Tiffany Braun's work was adequate but unremarkable. She'd missed 2 significant internal deadlines in the past quarter, and had been given an informal verbal warning by her team lead that hadn't yet escalated to HR. Cassidy Moore had 1 formal written note in her file from 6 weeks prior related to misrepresenting turnaround times to a client. Dana Ellsworth had a pattern of billing discrepancies that Ryan's finance team had flagged and was currently under review. Nothing criminal, but sloppy and consistent enough to have warranted attention. None of them were stars. None of them were in danger of being offered a competing salary by a rival firm. Priya's file was more complicated because Priya was actually good at her job. Her client satisfaction numbers were strong, her events had come in on budget, and 2 clients had specifically requested she be assigned to their accounts for the coming fiscal year. This was not the file of someone I could justify letting go on performance grounds, and I didn't want to. That wasn't the point. "What are you thinking?" Ryan asked. I told him. I won't pretend what followed was simple. I had a conversation with Priya first. A real one, not the controlled detonation kind. I told her about the Saturday. I told her exactly what I'd heard, and I told her how it had landed. I wasn't cold about it. I wasn't performing anything. I just talked to her the way I wished she talked to me, with respect. She got defensive immediately. That's the first stage. The comment was taken out of context, she said. Her friends had been asking what I did all day, and she'd just been trying to explain. She hadn't meant it the way it sounded. I asked her to tell me how she had meant it. She couldn't. The silence in the room was the most honest thing that had happened between us in months. And in that silence, I think she understood something, even if she wasn't ready to say it out loud. The marriage wasn't something I was willing to end over a comment made at a wine gathering, but it was something I needed to understand the meaning of, and I was starting to. I need you to know something, I told her. I've asked Ryan to restructure some of the senior-level positions. She looked at me carefully. What does that mean? It means your role is being redefined. The events partnership division is consolidating under a different structure. Ryan will explain the details on Monday. Are you... She stopped, then started again. Are you firing me? Ryan is, I said. Professionally, based on the restructure, your position as it currently exists will no longer exist. Holden? The company is mine, Priya. I've always owned it. Ryan runs it. But I own it. You knew that when you applied. She went very still. Your friends, I continued, are having similar conversations on Monday. Tiffany has a documented performance issue. Cassidy has a client relations flag on file. Dana's billing discrepancies have been under review for weeks. These are legitimate business decisions. The color left her face in a way I'd never seen before. You can't... This isn't... She pressed her hands flat on the counter, steadying herself. This is because of Saturday. You're doing this because of a comment. I'm doing this, I said, because I run a company that requires accountable professionals in every role, and because I finally started paying attention to who was in those roles. Monday came like any other Monday at Price Digital, the kind of morning where the parking lot fills up between 8 and 8:30, where the coffee machine in the break room gets a workout, where people sit at their desks and pull up their calendars expecting a normal week. Ryan handled it the way only Ryan can, with precision and without drama. He'd prepared properly, involving HR at every step, documenting the performance rationale for each termination in a way that was airtight and fair. Tiffany was called in at 9, Cassidy at 10, Dana at 11. Each conversation was professional. Each one cited the documented record. Each one included a standard severance package prepared by HR, a packet of information about continuation of benefits, and a thank you for their contributions to the company. Priya was the fourth conversation. Ryan handled hers personally, as he had the others. The position was being dissolved as part of a structural realignment of the events marketing division. It had nothing to do with performance. He said that clearly and genuinely, because it was genuinely true. Her work had been strong. The decision was architectural. She received a package consistent with her tenure. I wasn't in the building. I don't believe in spectacle. The point was never the show of it. The point was the truth of it. That evening I was sitting at my kitchen table when Priya came home. She set her bag down near the door. She stood there for a moment without saying anything. I waited. All four of us, she said finally. Yes. On the same day. Ryan believed a clean break was kinder than a drawn-out transition. I agreed with him. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from me, and for a long stretch neither of us said anything. I thought about what she must be turning over in her mind, the geometry of the past 3 years, recalculating angles she thought she'd understood, the husband she'd described as a man who didn't really work anymore, who'd been home all day, who didn't have a job. They're going to think I knew, she said. Tiffany and Cassidy and Dana. They're going to think I knew you were behind this and I said nothing. Did you know? You know I didn't. Then you didn't. She looked at me across the table, and for the first time in a long time I saw something behind her eyes that wasn't pride or impatience or the particular kind of social performance I'd watched her hone over 3 years of marriage. It was something closer to grief. I didn't respect you, she said. She didn't say it like a question or an accusation. She said it like a woman reading a sentence aloud to hear what it sounded like. No, I agreed. You didn't. I didn't understand what you'd built. I thought... She stopped, started again. I think I started measuring you by what I could see, and I couldn't see anything. You were just here. And I was going to an office every day and working and building something, and you were just here. In the house I own, I said. In the city where I built a company that employs 60 people, including, until today, your 3 closest friends. She flinched at that. Good. I'm not going to tell you that comment didn't matter, I said. It mattered. The comment mattered, and the fact that you made it in front of an audience mattered. The fact that 3 of the 4 women in this room were people you'd encouraged to build their careers at a company whose owner you were publicly dismissing. That mattered. Not because it hurt my feelings, Priya. Because it told me something true about what you think of me. And I needed to know that. She was quiet for a long time. Is our marriage something you're ending? She asked. I looked at her. Looked at the woman I'd married at a venue in Scottsdale, who'd laughed a laugh that lit up a room, who had been good at her job and terrible at seeing the full picture of her own life. I don't know yet, I said honestly. I think we need to find out what this is before we decide what to do with it. What happened in the weeks after that Monday is something I'll come back to because it matters. But first, I want to tell you about a phone call I got from Ryan 2 weeks after the restructure. He'd had a conversation with one of the clients whose account had been handled by the Events Partnership Division, a real estate development group based in Tempe that was expanding into commercial projects in Scottsdale and Gilbert. They'd been satisfied with the events coordination work, but were looking to expand the scope of the relationship, moving into a full digital campaign that would require more integrated strategy. Ryan had asked them directly what they were looking for. They said they wanted to speak with the owner. Ryan called me. I went into the office for the first time in 4 months. Sat in a conference room with a glass wall looking out over the Phoenix skyline, drank coffee from the machine I'd bought for the break room 6 years ago, and talked strategy with a development group that was going to become one of our largest accounts of the year. Afterward, Ryan walked me to the elevator. You know what's funny? He said. You've been gone 2 years and this place runs like you never left. That means you've been doing your job right, I said. He smiled at that. The staff was surprised to see you in the building. I'll bet. Cassidy's replacement starts next week, he said, because Ryan never wastes an opportunity to brief me. The new event structure is already showing cleaner margins, and the client services thing with Dana was messier than we expected. Finance found more of the billing irregularities. You made the right call. I nodded. I already knew. I'd been reviewing the financials. One more thing, Ryan said, holding the elevator door. Tiffany called HR last week. She's considering whether to claim wrongful termination. I looked at him. Her file, I said. The verbal warning, the missed deadlines. Everything documented and signed off by her team lead before any of this started. HR's comfortable. Legal reviewed it. He paused. She's going to figure out pretty quickly she doesn't have a case. She did. She hired an employment attorney in Tempe who reviewed the file and called her back within a week to tell her what Ryan's HR team already knew. The performance record was clean, the process was followed, the severance was above standard. There was nothing there. Tiffany didn't call Priya after that. None of them did, at least not in the way Priya expected. What I didn't expect, what surprised me most in all of this, was the conversation I had with my father. I drove down to Tucson on a Thursday. My father is 71 years old and still lives in the same house where I grew up. He was out in the backyard when I pulled up, doing something with the irrigation system that had been giving him trouble for months. I helped him fix it. Then we sat in the yard with 2 beers, and I told him everything. He listened the way my father always listened, without rushing toward a verdict, without filling the silence with noise. When I finished, he looked out at the yard for a long moment. Why'd you tell her? He asked. Tell her what? That you were the one behind it. The Monday. You could have let Ryan handle it and never said a word. I thought about that. Because she needed to know. For her sake or yours? That question sat in the air between us. Mine, I admitted. Both. Mostly mine. He nodded. You didn't do it to hurt her. I did it because I couldn't ignore what she'd shown me about how she saw me. She saw a man sitting home and assumed that meant nothing, my father said. He wasn't defending her. He was just stating the thing plainly, the way he always did. People do that. They measure by what they can see. Your grandfather did it to me when I started, said I was just going to run myself into the ground. He couldn't see what I was building. He just saw a young man who didn't have much yet. What did you do? My father took a sip of his beer. I kept building. Eventually he could see it. Some people need to see it before they believe it. Priya saw it, I said. She knew what I'd built. She just stopped believing I was still building it. Is your marriage going to make it? I didn't answer right away. I think we're finding out, I said. She's in counseling. I've joined her for 3 sessions. It's honest, at least. More honest than the last year of us not talking about what was wrong. My father was quiet for a moment. "You know what I always thought about you?" he said. "What?" "That you never needed anybody to believe in you to keep going." He looked at me. "That's been your best thing and your hardest thing your whole life. You don't need the validation, but you want it, especially from the people you love." That landed somewhere real. "Yeah," I said. "I do." It's been 5 months since that Saturday afternoon. Priya and I are still married. I want to be careful about what I claim there, because we are still in the middle of something. Not the crisis of it, but the slow work of figuring out what we actually are and want and expect from each other. The counseling has been hard and honest and occasionally infuriating in the way honest things often are. She has said things about how she'd started to see me that cost her something to say. I have said things about how I'd allowed distance to build between us rather than naming it. We haven't resolved everything, but we're talking to each other in a way we weren't before. What I know for certain is this. I don't regret Monday. I don't regret the phone call to Ryan. I don't regret the conversation at the kitchen table. I built something real over 20 years. I stepped back from it because I'd earned the right to. That has never once made me the man my wife described to her friends over wine in my own living room. Tiffany found a position at a smaller firm in Chandler within 2 months. Cassidy is freelancing, which I suspect suits her better than an office environment ever did. Dana's billing issues followed her. Word travels in this industry, and her next employer is going to look closely at those accounts. That's not something I arranged. It's just the weight of behavior catching up. The real estate client in Tempe signed a 12-month contract with Price Digital 6 weeks ago. Ryan called me when it came through. "Still advisory?" he asked. "Still advisory," I said. "You don't need me in the building for this." "I know, but the staff liked seeing you." "Tell them I said hello." I drove home through Phoenix in the late afternoon, the kind of desert light that turns everything amber and makes even a city look like it was built to last. I thought about my father in his backyard, about the irrigation system that just needed someone to pay attention to it, about the things people miss when they're not looking carefully. I thought about the word anymore. He doesn't really work anymore. As if the work is only real when someone can watch you do it. As if stepping back from something you built means you've become something lesser. As if the man who built the machine is less than the machine. I'm 47 years old. I've got 60 employees who count on decisions made with their interests in mind. I've got a CEO who calls me when it matters. I've got a marriage I'm choosing to fight for, not because I have to, but because I believe in the woman underneath the version of her that got comfortable and stopped looking. And I've got a Saturday afternoon in my own living room that I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for. Not because of what it cost, because of what it clarified. Sometimes the people who underestimate you do you a favor. Sometimes you need to see exactly what someone believes about you before you can make honest choices about what happens next. My name is Holden Price, and I own the company. This is the ultimate reality check. Priya made the fatal mistake of confusing quiet success with lack of ambition. She saw her husband in a gray t-shirt and forgot that he was the one who built the entire company she worked for. Holden didn't react with noise, he reacted with logic. He reminded everyone that you don't have to be in the building every day to be the one in charge. He didn't just reclaim his respect. He forced his marriage to finally be honest. The takeaway? Never let your success become so quiet that people forget you're the one who built the room they're standing in. Silence is a luxury you earn, but respect is a boundary you must always defend. Holden Price didn't just own the company, he owned the truth.